Throughout any era of racing, some iconic race cars have made a name for themselves and a stack of memories for us gearheads. Unfortunately and sadly, for all those cars that gathered fame, no matter when overcoming the odds to be on par to compete with their rivals, in most cases here, changes in the rules and regulations kill off these manufacturers' projects before they had their chance to show potential in the specific field of racing. Today, these two FIA GT1 cars define what could have been the category of race cars, the Ferrari F50GT and Koenigsegg CCGT. Both come from different eras and are different at first sight, but share so much in common with their fate. Both were promised to race in the classic FIA GT1 Championship and Le Mans 24 Hours, only to become ineligible to race due to the sudden changes in rules. We can all agree that both of these amazing race cars are true works of art, even to this day. These monsters were the unicorns that were forgotten or not spoken about anymore, and back when the F50GT and CCGT first came out, they were the childhood dream cars of Generation Y and Z. Both cars remain extremely rare to come by in real life, that only you can get hands-on driving them in video racing games such as Forza. Now for starters, Ferrari vs Koenigsegg has two different facts, where Ferrari is a much larger car brand with a racing heritage, and Koenigsegg is a very small car brand that produces one of the greatest hypercars on the planet with zero racing heritage. Let's not forget to realize that Ferrari is much older than Koenigsegg too. First, we begin the story about the Ferrari F50GT. The F50GT is essentially a non-street legal version of the street legal F50. What led to the development of the F50GT is that the F40GTE and F40LM were built to race in GT-style endurance racing, and though it was a very capable race car, by the early to mid-90s, the F40 was outdated and wasn't strong enough to rival the likes of the McLaren F1 GTR and the BPR Global GT series. So when the Ferrari F50 came out in 1995 to celebrate Ferrari's 50th anniversary, Ferrari decided to turn their highly limited supercar into a race car, and the F50GT was born in 1996. Only 3 of them were built with the assistance of Dallara and Michelotti, but the car was developed entirely by Ferrari in-house. The most notable changes compared to the Ferrari F50 were an air intake on the roof, a different wheel wing with 2 carbon pillars, and a carbon rear diffuser. The car had the same engine as the F50 and clutch with carbon fiber discs and a 6-speed sequential gearbox. The 4.7-liter naturally aspirated V12 was derived from the 1990 Ferrari 641 Formula 1 car, and the same applies to the Ferrari F333 SP prototype. However, the engineers at Ferrari tuned the engine sizably for endurance racing, and the result was a total of 750 horsepower and revving up to a whopping 10,500 RPM. Once achieved, the F50GT was first tested at the Fiorano track by works driver Nicola Larini, who beat the lap times of the Ferrari F333 SP prototype, which is impressive for a GT1 car. While the F50GT was in the final stages of development, in 1997, FIA took over the BPR Global GT series to attract new car makers to join and make the competition more fiercer and exciting. The series was renamed the FIA GT Championship, but more importantly, they also changed the rules, allowing the car makers to compete in GT1 class to produce purpose-built race cars based on 25-unit street homologation models. This led to the birth of the Porsche 911 GT1 and Mercedes CLK GTR, with McLaren upgrading the F1 GTR to the long-tail design. Because of the rule changes and the new purpose-built GT1 machines, the F50GT suddenly became obsolete and not eligible to compete in the class it was built for. This would force Ferrari to spend more money on further development and couldn't be bothered. As mentioned earlier, only 3 units were built in the entire world. The other 3 units were left unfinished, and the race teams of Ferrari were eager to get their hands on the F50GT, but didn't. Ferrari knew that despite the F50GT being faster than the F333 SP, it wouldn't have been competitive and would have been outgunned by every GT1 racer in the FIA GT Championship. It was a huge disadvantage for them because car makers such as Porsche, Mercedes, and McLaren were able to build Evolution models as a conversion of their extreme road legal supercars. Ferrari just based its F50GT1 car on the street legal F50 and not the other way around. As a result, the F50GT Ready to Race was for nothing, and the project was abandoned and only sold to trustworthy clients. It hurts to imagine that this race car with an F1 engine never got to compete in any series whatsoever. Despite that, the F50GT is one of the most insane and rarest race cars ever built in Maranello. Ultimately, the V12 sound is incredible. We move on to the story of the Koenigsegg CCGT that made its debut appearance in 2007. For starters, Koenigsegg is one of those very rare brands that did something very different and found their place in the supercar market. They are known for extremely fast, exclusive, and expensive cars. Christian von Koenigsegg is the man himself who built and designed his first CC prototype in the late 1990s. Going racing was always part of the design ideology for Koenigsegg. That is why Christian studied the ACO Le Mans regulations and made sure that his car would fit the regulations for GT1 class racing at the time. The first ever produced Koenigsegg was the CC8 from 2002, followed by the CCR in 2004, the CCX in 2006, and then the CCGT race car. The transformation of a road legal Koenigsegg into the CCGT racer was quite fascinating. The car was in development for many years to be based on the CCR with design features from the CCX. The CCGT came about as a side project for Christian and the engineers at Koenigsegg. On paper, the regulations stated that the road car isn't allowed to be wider than 2 meters, and the driver's cockpit has to have at least 70% of the width of the car. So the car was designed at those exact measurements so that the street car would fit the basis for the GT1 car. The final stage was promising with a carbon monocoque frame, a 5-liter V8 engine producing over 600 horsepower naturally aspirated as ACO regulated, weighed under 1,000 kilograms or 2,200 pounds without ballast in use, and had over 600 kilograms or 1,300 pounds of downforce. The CCGT was bound to be the first ever Koenigsegg to compete in any racing series, but never got to compete. The reason why it never went racing was just extremely petty. Just 2 months after Koenigsegg was putting the CCGT to test on the track, the ACO and FIA changed regulations for the GT1 class, which instantly made it obsolete. The carbon monocoques were banned, and car makers were required to produce a minimum of 350 road cars per year. At the time, the small Swedish company simply couldn't achieve that, and all the engineering and development put into the CCGT was for nothing. However, the hardcore drivers that have driven the CCGT stated that the car would have been very competitive against the likes of the Maserati MC12, Saleen S7, Lambo Murcielago RGT, etc. But thanks to the stupid regulations, the CCGT never got the chance to exhibit its racing legacy of what it was capable of being a hypercar racer. Nonetheless, the CCGT is truly one of the rarest and best Koenigsegg cars ever made. It is unknown how many of these were made, and the engine sound is just amazing to listen to. It's a shame that neither of these cars saw the track, and I'm sure many car enthusiasts would have loved to see them battle the competition. Both unicorns could have been game changers if they were to compete in GT1 racing without the bending rules by the FIA. Anyways, that's a wrap. I would love to read any of y'all opinions in the comments you have to say about these two legendary race cars. If you found this video interesting, do not forget to hit the like and subscribe button to my YouTube channel for some more quality content like this. You are also more than happy to give me any suggestions in the comments down below for future videos. Thanks for checking in and have an awesome day. Peace out, stay safe, Chris the Radar, out.